looking into progressive Christianity, point number 2 of what I believe, it says, by calling ourselves progressive, we mean we are Christians who affirm that the teachings of Jesus provide but one of many ways to experience the sacredness and oneness of life, and that we can draw from diverse sources of wisdom in our spiritual journey. Bruce Epperly begins on explaining this. Pluralism is a reality, and it always has been. The plurality of religious traditions and cultures has come to characterize every part of the world today, but what is pluralism? So and that is a quote from another young lady, Diana L. Eck. She is a scholar of religious studies who is a professor of comparative religion and Indian studies at one of our local universities in the United States, as well as a master of Lowell House and the director of the Pluralism Project at her school. She says, here are 4 points to begin our thinking. First, pluralism is not diversity alone, but the energetic engagement with diversity. Diversity can and has meant the creation of religious ghettos with little traffic between or among them. Today, religious diversity is a given, but pluralism is not a given. It is an achievement. Mere diversity without real encounter and relationship will yield increasing tensions in our societies. Second, pluralism is not just tolerance, but the active seeking of understanding across lines of difference. Tolerance is a necessary public virtue, but it does not require Christians and Muslims, Hindus, Jews, and ardent secularists to know anything about one another. Tolerance is too thin a foundation for a world of religious difference and proximity. It does nothing to remove our ignorance of one another and leaves in place the stereotype, half-truth, the fears that underlie old patterns of division and violence. In the world in which we live today, our ignorance of one another will be increasingly costly. Third, pluralism is not relativism, but the encounter of commitments. The new paradigm of pluralism does not require us to leave our identities and our commitments behind, for pluralism is the encounter of commitments. It means holding our deepest differences, even our religious differences, not in isolation, but in relationship to one another. Fourth, pluralism is based on dialogue. The language of pluralism is that of dialogue and encounter, give and take, criticism and self-criticism. Dialogue means both speaking and listening, and that process reveals both common understandings and real differences. Dialogue does not mean everyone at the table will agree with one another. Pluralism involves the commitment to being at the table with one's comments. So that's a little bit about the pluralism that Mr. Epperly first sits here and starts talking about. So moving back to what Mr. Epperly talks about. Diversity is built into the nature of life, whether in flora, fauna, or religious experience. Today, the diversity of religious and cultural experience shapes virtually everything we do. Every congregation and Christian lives with diversity. Some deny, some evade, some attack, and others embrace the unavoidable and often blessed diversity of life. So, real quick, let's see what the Bible says to a degree about this diversity. And we'll start with 1 Timothy chapter 4, verse 1. Now the Spirit speaketh expressly that in the latter times some shall depart from the faith, giving heed to seducing spirits and doctrines of devils. So it says that the Spirit speaketh expressly, and that there will be seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, and that people will depart from the faith. So when he's talking about that we need to have this diversity and that we need to be engaged with them, we do not need to isolate ourselves from them. It is true that we do not need to isolate in that we are to tell them the truth, but it also says that they are seducing spirits and doctrines of devils, that they are not part of the truth. 2 Timothy 4, so 2 Timothy 4, verses 3 and 4 say, for the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn away from their ears from the truth, and shall be turned unto fables. I absolutely love this part where it says having itching ears, because the word for itching ears is actually the word for rumor. So it's saying that there will come a time when people will not endure sound doctrine, that they will look for people with rumors, something that will make them feel better about themselves. They will not necessarily teach the truth of what the Bible says. And what this does is it's just another way of showing that we have the truth, and there will be people that will leave that truth looking for more. And that is what's going on when you have these talks of diversity and such. They are looking for more than what God has already said. 1 John 4, 5, and 6. So 1 John chapter 4, verses 5 through 6 says, "They are of the world, therefore speak they of the world, and the world heareth them. We are of God. He that knoweth God heareth us, and he that is not of God heareth not us. Hereby know we the spirit of truth and the spirit of error." So it's saying about these other religions and these other cultures that we are supposed to take into consideration with our Bible truths. They are of the world, and they speak of the world. It's not God speaking through them. They're speaking through the world. And I love how it says, "He that is not of God heareth not us. Hereby we know the spirit of truth and the spirit of error." People that listen to us and understand and speak with us, those are the people of truth. But when they speak of other things, when they speak of worldly things, that is the spirit of error. That was 1 John 4, 6, specifically with the word error. Sorry, my computer's going just a little slow right this moment. And the word for error, I went ahead and pulled it up, is plane. Sorry, the S is not pronounced, it is a silent S, plane. And the word for that, the actual Greek word used for error, when it's translated properly, is a wandering, deceit, delusion, or sin, in addition to error. It is a deviant behavior or a departure from what God says is true. So it's very specific here that they say that those who speak of the world speak of a deviant behavior that is a departure from what God says is true. It's more severe than just the word error. Romans 12:2 says, "And be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove that what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God." So we see here, again, a warning not to be conformed to the world. So all these world religions that are not Christianity, it says don't be conformed to them. All the social values that they have, if they're not what the Bible says, don't follow it. And Deuteronomy 18. So Deuteronomy 18, verses 9 through 14. 9 through... Sorry, I forgot the calling. "When thou art come into the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee, thou shalt not learn to do after the abominations of those nations. There shall not be found among you any one that maketh his son or his daughter to pass through the fire, or that useth divination, or an observer of times, an enchanter or a witch, a charmer, a consulter with familiar spirits, a wizard or a necromancer. For all that do these things are an abomination unto the Lord. And because of these abominations the Lord thy God doth drive them out from before thee. Thou shalt be perfect with thy Lord thy God. For these nations which thou shalt possess hearken unto observers of times and unto diviners, and as for thee, the Lord thy God hath not suffered thee so to do." Verse 14 here specifically does not have hearkened unto observers of the time. When you look back at the Hebrew, it says that it is listening and practicing divination. So it's saying, for these nations which thou shalt possess, hearken to and listen to the diviners. It was listening and practicing divination, but as for thee, the Lord thy God has not suffered thee to do so. So when you see these religions that practice all this, it's saying that is not what it's supposed to be, again. And one last verse, 1 Kings 18:21, and then we'll take a short break. 1 Kings 18:21 says, "And Elisha came unto the people, and said, How long halt ye between two opinions? If the Lord be God, follow him, but if Baal, then follow him. And the people answered him not a word." So all these people that want a diverse interreligious conversation. Elijah said, if the Lord be God, follow him. But if Baal, follow him. Don't sit there in the middle of the road. Don't sit there and converse going, well, can we make it both work together? No, you either choose. You choose God, or you don't choose God. And that's why Joshua said, choose ye this day whom ye will serve. But as for me and my house, I will serve the Lord.